What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and today we're doing one of the most requested budget decks of the whole season. We're finally building with Golden Guardian. Well, first cool thing about Golden Guardian is note that price tag. It's super cheap to play this thing right now. Super fun and kind of effective too. So first point in its favor. And the second thing I want to direct your attention towards is that unlike a lot of these transform cards from the last couple of sets, this thing isn't legendary. So consequence free, we can play as many copies of it as we want. We're going to take advantage of that and run the playset. But one of the coolest things about Guardian, and something I definitely need to point out, it's really important tech, is that you can use its ability at instant speed. So at the end of your opponent's turn, hello Igby, you see his tail popping up, but at the end of your opponent's turn, you can have it fight one of your own dudes, and then, for your turn, you'll have a fresh factory, just ready to go. And, even better, you can do this during your opponent's combat step, so you can make blocks, and then your opponent's creatures will be considered blocked, but you can still, during their combat step, have Guardian fight one of your other creatures and turn over. Now, there are multiple ways of building around Golden Guardian, but the method we've chosen, I think, is the safest and easiest way of doing it. We're basically just going to be using Death Touch dudes to make sure that no matter what's fighting Golden Guardian, it will transform. So, with that in mind, we've got a gang of Death Touchers in this deck. We've got like 20 different Death Touch creatures, but most of them are going to be small-ish dudes. And this allows us to do a few things. It allows us to already have a Death Touch dude when we play our Guardian, so that we can most easily turn it over. And it allows us to have Death Touch guys in the early game to help stave off aggro onslaughts, so we can actually get to the point of the game where we can flip over Guardian. So most of our creatures are going to be small, aggro, Death Touch dudes, starting with 4 copies of Direfleet Poisoner. Direfleet is poison. This is actually one of the best creatures that we can play for this entire deck. I mean, it's not necessarily one of the best Death Touch creatures in Standard, but it's specifically amazing in this deck where it gives us cool tricks. Like, even if we don't have any Death Touch creatures out, but we have a Guardian, we can still, super surprise sneak attack style transform our Guardian on their turn when they really didn't expect that to happen. But, aside from that, this is just a good creature in its own right. It's fine against aggro decks where it's essentially 2 mana instant speed removal that they don't see coming, or against control decks, it's a flash body, so if they happen to tap out on your turn or any time really, then you can just flash this into play and it's an extra body, and bodies are just always good against control decks for the most part. So Direfleet has a few different applications outside of just transforming Guardian, but it's one of the best cards we can play if we want to transform Guardian too. But we're actually not done with amazing Death Touch 2-drops. We're also going to play a whole 4 copies of Gifted Aetherborn, because we should do that. He's young, he's black, and he's gifted. This is amazing when it comes to transforming Guardian, because we get a couple of extra life off of the play. That helps extend the game a little bit, so we can actually get to the next turn when we can start making tokens off of our factory. So that's important, but this has just always been an amazing creature against all of the aggro decks in the format, specifically mono red. This is an early game blocker that'll usually trade with one of their dudes or just not even die and kill one of their guys and gain you some life back. This doesn't quite brick wall aggro or anything, but it's still an amazing early game play against mono red. Now this is a budget deck and it's only like $35, so you're probably wondering at what point the card quality is going to drop. Right around here. We're going to play 3 copies of Skittering Heartstopper. Now, if you had the money, you'd just play Fatal Push over this. I think there's multiple reasons to play Push over something like this, but obviously Heartstopper can still give you something to do with your mana on turn 1, and it's an easy way to flip over Guardian. I mean, you have to pay the extra mana to give it Death Touch, but who's really counting? Heartstopper is still decent when it comes to stopping early aggro boards or just trading with a creature, and it flips Guardian, and it only costs the 1 mana. I'll take it. It's not the best thing in the world. You'll play Fatal Push if you've got them, but Heartstopper, we could do worse than. We're also going to play 3 copies of Aether Poisoner, which looks like a crap card, but it's actually not so bad. Full disclosure, Poisoner's like the only card in the entire deck that produces or does anything with energy, but still, getting an extra servo every now and again, not bad at all, even if this only makes 1 servo. That's fine, it's a board in a box against both aggro and control. Multiple blockers against aggro, big board state against control. That's fine against both decks. And honestly, it's just a 2-mana Death Touch guy, which is all we want. We just get extra value from the servo. And Aether Poisoner actually opens us up to a corner play, but it is tech, so I should at least point this out. Most of the creatures in the deck, if they fight Golden Guardian, Guardian's going to die, no matter what. But he won't die against a servo. Now, that allows us to, say, make blocks with Golden Guardian against a creature that he'll trade with. Let's just for the sake of argument, say they're swinging with a 4/4, we got a Golden Guardian. So what we got to do here is make blocks with the Golden Guardian, and then once we block, make it fight our servo. Obviously, it kills our servo doesn't kill it, but when it trades with the creature it's blocking, it'll flip over. So it allows us that corner play, whereas no other creature in the deck lets us do that. Actually, Skittering Heartstopper can do it too, which is another good thing about Skittering Heartstopper. You know, just don't give it Death Touch and have it fight your Guardian when your Guardian's going to trade anyway. We can do that. Now, this won't work often against astute opponents because they'll see that play sitting on the board, but sometimes you will be able to catch people off guard with it. But we're obviously not done with Death Touch dudes. We got a lot of them to talk about. So we're also going to play 4 copies of Bone Picker in the deck. Now this card gets 1,000 times better if you upgrade to Fatal Push from Skittering Heartstopper, but I'll still play all 4 copies of Bone Picker. No qualms about that. It gives us a flying Death Touch creature, which is really important. You know, getting in some damage over the heads of other decks is important, as is blocking some of the flying creatures in this format. And there are times where I'm okay with paying 4 mana for a Bone Picker, but usually you're still only paying the 1 mana. We got a lot of little Death Touch guys in the early game that we can try to get in for combat damage, and if they do happen to die in the early game in combat, then Bone Picker only costs 1 during our second main phase. So got that going for us, not to mention the fact that Golden Guardian will obviously die. You know, we're trying to make it die. So that means that Bone Picker only costs 1 on turns where we transform a Guardian. But up here at 4 on the curve, we're also going to play 2 copies of Gonti, Lord of Luxury. I mean, you can make a case that this is the best Death Touch creature in all of Standard, or at least the one that sees the most play right now. I know Aetherborn still sees some sideboard play for the mono-red matchups in some decks, but Gonti actually sees like 1 and 2 of main deck play and sideboard play. So Gonti's not necessarily everywhere, but a popular card right now for a lot of reasons. But not only is Gonti good for the reasons it's good in like every deck that it's in, but it's also yet another way to transform a Golden Guardian, so it's even better in this deck. I think we should play a couple of copies of it. And this is another card that's like amazing when resolved against control and really good against mid-range, you know. It denies them a huge threat or an amazing spell they would otherwise draw in the next couple of turns. So it denies them one of their better top decks, and it gives it to you. You know, you can get removal off of this. You can get a huge bomb threat creature off of this sometimes. You can even get like little stuff you might need, like a Glint Sleeve. You know, I got a Glint Sleeve Siphoner off of this Gonti. Hey, cool, I got a couple of energy from Ether Poisoner anyway. Let me draw some cards. So Gonti just does all kinds of cool stuff, and it's a Death Touch body on top of that. Now, there actually are a couple of more creatures in the deck, but I'll save them for just a second. We'll talk about them in a minute. First, I want to show you the spells that we're playing in this deck. We're going to play 2 copies of Supernatural Stamina, 4 copies of Doomfall, and 2 copies of Battle at the Bridge. Now, I don't want to play all of the Supernatural Staminas. I just don't think that it's quite relevant enough all the time, and we don't have all the slots in the world in this deck. So I think 2 is correct, but this is a great card on turns where you plan to lose a Death Touch creature, transforming Golden Guardian. You know, you can just get that Death Touch creature back into play for just 1 mana. It's not bad at all, and this is a great combat trick. Getting it's the same little Death Touch guy twice is actually a huge headache for a lot of aggro and mid-range decks. As far as the Battle at the Bridge goes, this is sort of a budget alternative to Vraska's Contempt. You know, I'd probably play Contempt if we had the budget for it, but Battle at the Bridge is actually a pretty decent version of it. You know, it can still take out Hazaret when you needed to. It can take out Ronus and stuff, just like Vraska's Contempt can. It doesn't necessarily exile, which is kind of balls against like Scarab God. You'd rather have the exile clause, but still, this can take out a lot of stuff that we're really, really worried about and gain us a bunch of life back, extend the game, get us to the point where we can actually get a couple of tokens off of our factory. And as far as the Doomfall, all 4 copies of this is a fantastic card in just about any deck that carries black. But if you haven't noticed, we don't have a whole lot of 3-drops. This actually fills the 3-drop slot on the curve really, really well. And it's great to play on turn 3, where it can take care of things like Hazaret, Scarab God, Rekindling Phoenix, Glorybringer, long before our opponent can even actually ever play them. It's great against control, too. It gets counterspells and sweepers and stuff out of their hand. This is just good against most decks in the format on turn 3. And by the way, those cards I just mentioned, Scarab God, Rekindling Phoenix, Hazaret, they're some of the most popular cards in the format, as well as some of our biggest weaknesses, so we have to have some kind of main deck answer to all of them. And I think Doomfall may be one of the safest main deck answers to them because it has so much versatility. But we'll finish off the main deck here with some one-ofs that we're playing. I'm actually playing 3 one-ofs in this deck, and it's because I don't want to see them all very often in game 1, but I do still want the chance to see them. So let me show these to you. We're going to play 1 copy of Tetsamok, 1 copy of Bantu, and 1 copy of Argel's Bloodfast. Now, Bloodfast is only really good against control decks, but it's really good against control decks. So I want the ability to see this card in game 1, even though I really don't necessarily like it against mono red. We'll just sideboard it out. Don't have to worry about it. But I want the ability to draw this against control and even mid-range decks. So I'm going to play 1 copy of it because it's just that good. And when we turn it over, it's at least worth pointing this out. When we turn it over, it gives us the ability to do cool stuff. Like we can block with Golden Guardian factory tokens and then sacrifice them to this land, to the temple, and gain 4 life a pop. That could actually keep us in the game for a long time. The Bantu, same, it's not super important to the deck. It's legendary. I really don't want to ever see more than 1 copy of this in a given game, so I think 1 copy is correct here. Again, we don't have to draw a Bantu in just about any game, but it is good sometimes. Again, there's corner situations where Bantu is very relevant. Say we're in a situation where, for whatever reason, we can't get through with Guardian tokens. Even if we get a lot of grindage and we can grind like 4 or 5 tokens out, we still can't necessarily get through for whatever reason, or we're playing against a control deck that has options against us. We can just sacrifice those tokens to Bantu and grind out the game that way by gaining life and making them lose some. That can sometimes be important. And Bantu is a death touch creature, so it can turn over, a Guardian really easily without dying, which is relevant too. So I think there's just enough cool stuff about Bantu that I want to play the 1 copy, but no more. And the 1 copy of Tetsamok there, this is a legendary 6-drop creature. And I don't necessarily want to see more than 1 copy of it ever in the course of, any game. But Tetsamok does do some cool stuff when we end up seeing it. I've already mentioned that we don't have a bunch of 3-drops. That is another cool thing Bantu does, by the way, is it's a 5th 3-drop to help thin up, or to help fill up a thin slot. But, again, we don't have all the 3-drops, so there are going to be turns where if we have a Tetsamok in our hand, on turn 3, we'll play a 2-drop creature and use that 3rd mana to put a prey counter on something. Also, should point this out, if we get Golden Guardian on turn 4, and then next turn we get our 5th land drop, then we'll often play a 2-mana Death Touch creature and activate Golden Guardian. That gives us a mana left over. That means that we can play a prey counter on a creature and then next turn right into our Tetsamok. So we'll have the 6th land because we flipped over Golden Guardian, right? So that's another corner play you can make with a Tetsamok. Not to mention the fact that this is just a huge dude that's relatively tough to remove and can finish a game off. That leaves us room for 25 lands, which seems like a bit much, but we got to get to Golden Guardian on turn 4 as consistently as possible. Plus, we've got some other plays in the deck that cost a good bit of mana. Battle at the Bridge, Tetsamok, and things like If Near Deadlands, which actually cost a good bit of mana to get working. So we need all the mana that we can come across in this deck. Actually, one more thing before I move on from the mana base. If you have the money, put a couple of copies of Field of Ruin in here. You can cut a couple of black sources from this deck and still have 20 black sources, so you don't even have to cut any of the colorless lands. I think you'll be fine. Importantly, it can kill other Field of Ruins. Our whole thing here is that we're trying to flip over Golden Guardian, and Control hates when we actually resolve Golden Guardian and flip it over. Their only recourse when we actually flip into our factory is Field of Ruin. So we should have Field of Ruin in here to kill Field of Ruin. I think Field of Ruin is a very important card to play. I just didn't want to spend, almost $50 to build this thing. Here's our sideboard right here. We're trying to sort of hose aggro and control in equal parts. Let's look at the control hosers first. You'll see we're playing 4 copies of Duress, another copy of Bloodfast, and a copy of Lost Legacy. Now, along with the Doomfalls in the main deck, this will give us 9 things that'll make them discard stuff against control decks, which is a pretty easy way to pick them apart. There's not much they can do sometimes against these, heavy discard strategies. Now, against aggro, we've got Moment of Craving, Hour of Glory, and Yeheni's Expertise. I'll talk about Hour of Glory in a second, but first of all, Yeheni's Expertise, just a sweeper against aggro. I like sweepers against aggro. So So we'll play that, and we'll very often get a free card off of it because we have a lot of stuff that costs 3 or less in this deck. Now, my reasoning for Hour of Glory instead of just more copies of Battle at the Bridge is, first of all, Hour of Glory is just better against the Scarab God than Battle at the Bridge is. So there's obviously that. That's very important. But after boards, you know that you're specifically trying to answer Hazoret, Scarab God, a couple of other creatures. And so Hour of Glory will lead to card advantage sometimes. You know they're running for Hazoret, for instance. So, if you play Hour of Glory on their Hazoret, it's somewhat likely that you'll get a second copy out of their hand that you'll never have to worry about. I mean, it's not Ixalan's Binding, but it is instant speed. This is actually a fairly powerful card. And finally, you'll note the weird-looking Ruin Rat there. That's obviously against Godfair's Gift. We already have Scavenger Grounds in the main deck against those, but this is just a little extra insurance, and it's cool that you can, kill a Golden Guardian with it and make them get rid of a card from their graveyard. Relevant sometimes. It's better than nothing against these graveyard decks. And here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 60 points, which is a pretty good baseline for a decent deck, especially when we're dealing with budget decks. So I like a lot of what this deck's doing. It's got high marks in some categories, or at least average or above average marks in a lot of categories. We're not very fast. We're really trying to grind games out here. So, that stat we're really not doing too well in, but we're at least average in resiliency. We got Battle at the Bridge, we've got Supernatural Stamina, and above all else, we've got Golden Guardian. Very resilient to be able to make a 4/4 dude every turn, so we've at least got average resilience. Plus, we're pretty versatile, we've got little dudes to fill the board against slower decks in the early game, and we've got little dudes to fill the board and prolong the game against aggro decks. It makes us pretty versatile, and best thing about it is the consistency. We're a super consistent deck. We're only the one color. A lot of decks that I've saw while trying to do research for this deck on Tapped Out and stuff, were green and black so they could play Narnum Renegade, and Ronus. And I will say, if we're going to play a 1-drop, Narnum is probably way better than Skittering Heartstopper. And Ronus is a great 3-drop to fill out that thin slot. But I just don't think it's worth it. In terms of making this deck good, to play green. I think that we just lower the budget a good bit and increase the consistency by a lot by making this deck one color. So in the end, I had a lot of fun with this deck. I think you will too. So if you're interested in trying this thing out, as always, just click the first link in the description and they'll take you over to my sponsors at TCG Player. Sorry, headphones users. Apologize. I just have to get hyped for it every time. But anyway, they're good people. They help the channel out, and they happen to be cheapest place you'll find this deck online. Some other sites, this thing will cost you $50, $60 all told, but TCG Player, it's only about $35 to order this thing, put it right in your mailbox for you. So check out the first link in the description, help the channel out when you do that. But with that, pretty sure I'm officially tapped out for this one. Let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments section. I really had a lot of fun with this, but if there's anything that I didn't put in the deck, always feel free to let me know. This is a conversation. It's not a one-way thing. I want to know what you feel. So do that. Like the video if you enjoyed it, the most low-effort way you can help the channel out. Or you can subscribe if you haven't done that yet, because not only are there more deck techs, but there's obviously Dominaria spoilers within the next few weeks here, especially if they start releasing some sort of early ones. Although it feels like they're keeping this one mostly under wraps. But you do want to be subscribed for when those do come down the pipeline. So sub, hit the bell for the notifications. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev for nuggets of wisdom and also to know when decks come out. Or conversely, throw me $1 a month on patreon.com/SBMTG, and I'll let you know what decks we're doing 24 hours before I upload them to YouTube. So, I'll help you out. I'll do you a solid. You throw me $1 a month. There's another link in the description if you feel like doing that. But pretty sure that's all I got for this one. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.